Yep. Yep. It's on. Right. Just like I'm streaming webcams. Okay. Oh, my bad.
Oh.
Hi, everyone.
This is a use case, and we'll finish reading the entire instructions and let the instructor finish telling you the full instructions before doing things.
That's right.
Now you're live, so you either have to stop it, or I'll just let you take the show from here.
I'll take it from here, James. Thank you. Thank you. So no introduction, no full fancy music tonight. Hello, everyone. I am Carolina Weather Group panelist Scotty Powell here with you, and this is the Wednesday, October 16, 2019 edition of our little weather get-together. We are glad to have you tonight. Joining us tonight is the South Jersey Climate News Project, and they're going to be talking to us about some of the things that they're doing in South Jersey that are talking about the climate and how it's impacting not only their area, but all of us, honestly, are impacted by the warming climate and climate change. So we're going to go into that and what they are doing up in South Jersey tonight. So we are looking forward to that. You are watching us on our live stream. So if you have any comments, please feel free to drop them in the comment bar. We'll be monitoring those throughout the show. And if you have any questions for our guests, we will make sure we get to those. Before we get into tonight's show, we want to talk a little bit about the weather. It has been kind of boring around here lately, but we finally got our first official fall cold front move through the area. And so that has given a lot of the area some much needed rainfall. I'll take over here for North Carolina, and then I'll toss it over to Shay and Evan, who are in South Carolina. Here in North Carolina, obviously some much needed rainfall, anywhere between a quarter to a half an inch. I did see some locations up towards the Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, Winston-Salem area pick up close to an inch of rain. So that is some good news for those areas. And then tonight, this cold front is ushering in some much cooler temperatures and gusty winds. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in tonight's program. Shay and Evan, you guys also were able to see the cold front move through, and you guys actually picked up a little bit more rain than we did here in North Carolina.
Yeah, Scotty, today was one of the only days in my 2 years in Charleston that I've had to walk to class in the rain. That just really never happens because it's so dry here all the time, or at least it's been so dry over the last year and a half. And it's been real rainy down here. I'll kind of talk to the Western North Carolina side of things, and I'll save the South Carolina, Charleston area for Shay. Obviously, he's been here longer. But for Western North Carolina, the cold front moved through earlier this afternoon, brought with it a bunch of gusty winds, and the cold air is really just rushing in now. The higher peaks are currently dropping below freezing. Mount Mitchell's sitting around 31 degrees, and this is the first time since probably May that anywhere in Western North Carolina or the Carolinas in general have been below freezing. So this is the first real taste of fall, and we're looking towards winter almost towards the end of October. So probably talk about that a little bit later because that's an exciting topic that everyone wants to talk about. But over the next couple of nights, we're going to see temperatures dropping down into the mid to lower 30s. Not much frost happening tonight because of the wind, and that constant wind movement will keep the frost off the grass and off the low-lying surfaces. But tomorrow night and potentially even Friday morning for some of the lower valleys, there could be frost and temperatures right down near freezing. Not much precipitation with this cold front, unfortunately. All of the rain moved through over the weekend, and no snow. This is just really dry and really windy. Winds will be peaking tonight around maybe midnight to 2 a.m. Gusts up to 35, 40 in the valleys, maybe upwards of 75, 80 on top of the mountains. So, yeah, this is just a dry northwest flow that we're in right now. And I'll toss it over to Shay.
All right, Evan. Yeah, I know over you look forward to seeing the northwest flow as things start to cool down and the chances start to go up for that S word that we won't mention yet. But yeah, for South Carolina, for the coastal South Carolina area in the Midlands, we're still working through some drought situations across the Midlands, not so much at the coastline until you get to the southeastern quadrant. But for the most part, the cold front, it made it through this morning. We had some dry slotting come in by about late morning to noon. So things cleared out, ended up being a beautiful afternoon. We're looking for a beautiful day tomorrow in the low 70s. Tonight, I think we're getting down into the low 50s for lows. So that's going to be feeling a little bit chilly when you walk out tomorrow morning and tomorrow night as well, as the temperatures drive down just a few more degrees into Friday. Then we bounce back up into the 70s, maybe low 80s over the weekend. But we are looking at a system in the Gulf, and I'll be talking that in a little while, that could be bringing quite a bit of rain over our area. It just depends on how fast it's going to be moving. I'll go ahead and share a screen real quick. I wanted to quickly show you this just for a sense of what's going on in the southeast for drought situation. There's still a lot of areas of extreme drought in the D3 on the monitor here. We haven't gotten into exceptional yet, but I do think with some of the Gulf moisture that's going to be coming up from the Bay of Campeche and up across the northern Gulf states and into the southeast, we may start to get some of these colors down into the D2 and D1, some of these reds. So we'll have to wait and see how much rain falls and what the forecast is. But for right now, we're waiting to see if that system's going to come together. It hasn't quite developed a surface low yet, but either way, hopefully Mother Nature will provide and help with balance on our drought. And with that said, I'll go ahead and kick it back to you, Scotty.
All right, thank you for that, Shay. We are going to go a little bit more into those drought numbers later on in the program, but I want to bring in our guest tonight from the South Jersey Climate News. Peter, we're actually interviewing one of our panelists tonight. That's kind of a first, I believe. So, Peter, I'm going to toss it to you and let you introduce us to everyone tonight.
All right, sounds good. Well, first off, let's go with Mark Berkey-Girard, who is a journalism professor at Rowan University, who's joining us tonight, and also Diane Gariantes, who is also a journalism professor at Rowan. These two are the advisors for South Jersey Climate News. And then we also have Corey, who is a student at Rowan and is also part of our team. So, Mark, or Scotty is leading the chat tonight. So, Scotty, let's get this started, huh?
Yeah, that's fine. Evan, I know you've got our first block of questions, so I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take over here for the first segment of the show. So I'm going to target this first question at you, Mark. I'm sorry, we're leading right off the bat with you, but can you tell us a little bit about South Jersey Climate News and just a general what it is?
Sure. Thanks for having us on tonight. This project is a student-run news project. We're located in Glassboro, New Jersey, which is about 25 miles southeast of Philadelphia. So it's kind of a mix of suburban, rural, and then not too far from the Jersey Shore as well. So we wanted to create a student-run project where students could report on things happening on campus that are related to the environment and sustainability, but also in the surrounding areas. So we came up with the idea, we launched it, we got a little bit of funding, and so we've been kind of ramping up this semester, and it's been growing ever since. So Diane, do you want to chime in a little more about the beginning of it?
Yeah, I can. I think part of it is just what's been going on with journalism. Recently, journalism's been having a lot of changes, and especially economically, we've seen a lot of local journalism kind of slowing down. A lot of small community news organizations closing shop. And so we felt like as a university, maybe we could help fill some gaps with some real, with some reporting on some important issues, including climate change, because where we are, we're in South Jersey, we are, as Mark said, we're not far from the coast, from the South Jersey coast. There's bay areas around us. There's a Pinelands region, which is a very, a huge area of natural wooded areas. And there's a lot of agriculture in the area. So it's a part of New Jersey. People think of New Jersey as more of an urban state, but really the part of New Jersey that we're in, it's pretty rural, and it's really potentially, already we're seeing effects on because of climate change. So that's why we wanted to get this started. So it's been a fun project to work on.
Oh, so you guys are taking somewhat of a collaborative approach towards this journalism. It's not just your university, but it's also other universities. I'm going to start, Diane, can you tell us a little bit about the other universities that you're working with?
Yeah, we are. We're working with actually a number of organizations. We're working with news organizations, which is really what we want to be doing. We want to work with other news organizations. We're partnering particularly with a small startup in Atlantic City called Route 40. So we've been working a lot with them, working on various articles and projects with them. Our student reporters are working with them. We're also part of, we also have other news partners that we're working with. We aggregate a lot of content with them, both from Philadelphia, WHYY, which is the public radio station in Philadelphia, some of the television stations in the area, and some of the larger news organizations in the state of New Jersey. We're working with them. And then, and I think Mark could speak best to this, we're also collaborating with other student organizations throughout the state. In fact, Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the Center for Cooperative Media?
Sure. There's a project in New Jersey that works to get news organizations working together, and then they kind of have a student arm as well. So we're working with 6 other universities in New Jersey. And once a year, we all pick a topic that all the student journalists are going to cover. So it's kind of, we're covering things individually, but then it creates this collective to kind of get more attention. And there's also some collaborative work where students from different universities are working on kind of similar stories. So this year, the students actually picked climate as the topic that they wanted to cover. So that's a really exciting project to be working with, people from different kinds of institutions, North Jersey, which is kind of more urban and closer to New York, and us. And so it's cool to see, the stuff that the students are coming up with together. And it also just gets more attention for student media across the state. So we're trying to get, student voices and reporting into the kind of the news cycle of the state.
Well, that's awesome. That's some great information. I'm going to transition a little bit to Corey and Peter. As Scotty was saying, this might be the first time we've ever interrogated a panelist. So Peter, I'll let you lead off, and then you can toss it to Corey. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with South Jersey Climate News.
Funny story to this. So back in, this had to be the fall of 2018. It was the last week of the semester, and I had Professor Gary Antes for a class, and she just kind of nonchalantly mentioned that there was going to be this collaborative project going on about climate change and yada, yada, yada. So I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool, whatever. So about a couple days after that, I get an email from Mark Berkey Gerard. Now, let me tell you something. I never interacted with him before I got this email. We never met each other. So getting an email from the department head, I was scared. Thought I got expelled or something. So finally, I opened the email, big long thing about this project, and I should join and all this stuff. So I left it in my inbox for a month. I did not answer it. I didn't look at it again. So for the spring of 2019, I finally responded back. I did agree to join, and I've been with them ever since. And I have to say, I have enjoyed my time here since I started. It's a great project. Really learned a lot of eye-opening experiences. So I'm glad to be part of the team. Corey, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would think my story echoes Pete's in a way. I first discovered it when I was just scrolling through my emails. I'm like, oh, who's this Mark Berkey Gerard guy? But I was looking for an experience that was going to be outside of the classroom, something that was going to give me a real experience, and that's why I joined, and it's really delivered on that.
Well, that's awesome. And Peter, I can definitely relate to the being a little bit afraid of a email from a department head and leaving it unanswered for a little bit too long. I've been there very recently. So now I want to ask about the website that y'all run. Many of us were just visiting it before the show and getting familiar with it. And for the listeners and people that are watching, it's sjclimate.news. I just said that wrong. Someone correct me when, after I finish here. But Mark, can you tell us a little bit about this website and how you're incorporating all these different articles together to make one complete climate story?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a couple levels. There's the stories that the students are doing. So I'm just checking in with them weekly and assigning. Sometimes it's assigning stories, events they want to cover, or particular issues. So we're doing that. We're collaborating with the student newspaper at Rowan, which is called The Wit, which Peter and Corey are both involved in as well. So that's kind of a nice connection, and to help get their stuff out more. We also work, as Diane said, work with this a startup in Atlantic City called Route 40. And Atlantic City has a lot of issues going on. There's a lot of localized flooding that comes from at high tides. The water comes back into the storm drains and then comes up through the sewers. So that's kind of a project we've been working on with them. This summer, the state of New Jersey approved a big wind farm project, offshore wind farm, the first in the country. And so we did some coverage of that kind of leading up to it. And then as it was announced, so that's actually right outside of Atlantic City, which is another kind of interesting connection to that. And then we're working on projects and ideas with these other universities. And we're hoping to do some work in the future with a organization called Climate Central, which is kind of a news and research arm that deals with a lot of environmental things. And then NJ.com, which is a big online news site. We're going to look at some like development along the Jersey Shore, on the bay sides and the ocean sides, where people are building giant vacation houses that are going to flood in not very, very long amount of time. So kind of looking at who's building these, what are cities, how are they preparing? So there's kind of some different levels. And then we also kind of have some agreements with some news organizations that let us aggregate their stuff. So that's kind of the main plan.
Cool. I'll hop in just for a second here. I wanted to ask, when did this all kind of start? Like, is this sort of a post-Sandy effort, or is this something that was kind of existing beforehand? But as Diane mentioned earlier, in some of our pre-talk, that some of these things kind of went away, and so you're kind of filling a niche here. And was this more or less coming from maybe some additional funding from Sandy, or was this born right out of just university level research?
I mean, I can speak to that. This actually came out of the university, this idea. And again, part of it was just that we were looking as a journalism department, seeing what's going on with the news. It's called the news ecosystem, like what's going on locally with news and how, organizations are struggling. News organizations are struggling economically. There's fewer and fewer reporters. Newsrooms are shrinking. And meanwhile, there's a lot going on, that needs to be reported, including, again, in our area, climate change is huge because it has, New Jersey is one of the fastest states that's fastest warming states in the country. And sea level rise for us here in New Jersey, it's compounded because it's not only is there sea level rise, but the land is actually sinking. So we're getting, so the coastal areas are really being affected. And Atlantic City is actually a great place to start because, anywhere along the coast, but, Atlantic City, you've got a lot of, you've got these huge casinos that are there. And so you've got the U.S. Army, the Army Corps of Engineers, in there putting in, building projects and planning these big projects. But then you've got these back bay areas behind, where the casinos are, where people are living and they're getting flooded, between the tides and the floods. In the sea level rise, it's just, their quality of life is just being deteriorated all the time. And big storms come in and, you've got a lot of property damage. And so Superstorm Sandy certainly woke everybody up. But really it's becoming more and more just a regular occurrence with flooding and hotter temperatures and severe storms. Just like all along the coast, but in New Jersey, we're certainly feeling it. So we wanted to start reporting on that. So that's why we created this and began to build partnerships. And really, we still feel like, Mark could speak to this too, but I still feel like we're in the beginning stages of it. We're really getting it off the ground. We're building partnerships. We're getting students who are interested in this. We're actually starting to create courses at the university, and we're looking for additional funding. So we're really trying to build something here that'll last, that'll be around for a long time.
No, I think that's fantastic as our coastlines, even all the way down here, coastlines are more vulnerable now. And so everyone's trying to figure out ways to mitigate risk and create more resiliency along the coast. King Tide Initiative being one with SCD HEC and multi-state coordination there. But so yeah, it's pretty fascinating to see what you all are doing as well. So back to you, Evan.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to toss to Scotty here in a second, but I wanted to say one last thing that, as some of the listeners know, and you guys generally know, I go to the College of Charleston in downtown Charleston, and it's cool to see the connections between what y'all are doing climate-wise to what we're doing here at the College of Charleston, and the focus on sustainability in the future and how we're going to have to adapt as the sea levels are rising, and even as, like you said, Diane, the ground is sinking in some places, which is a terrifying thought. The Charleston Peninsula has so much incredible and historic architecture, as well as so many places have that up and down the coast. It's just cool to draw these lines and see how different universities across the Eastern Seaboard are discussing this and getting involved. So yeah, I'll toss it over to you, Scotty.
Yeah, Evan, you're talking about Charleston. The Outer Banks experienced this last week. No real hurricane, not even really a nor'easter. We had a few storm systems off the coast, but we saw enough of the tides move in during high tide that we saw a lot of overwash on Highway 12 out in the Outer Banks where it was shut down. And so we can all attribute that to sea level rise. And as the sea level rise continues, we're going to see more and more events take place, which kind of leads me into what I was wanting to talk about, Diane, with you. You talked a little bit about why New Jersey, Atlantic City has been kind of the focus of this program. What are some of the things that you guys are learning from that? I know you've taken some trips out to Atlantic City. You talked to some residents. Tell us a little bit about the particular location that you're looking at and some of the facts and information you're getting from that.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to some of that. I mean, certainly, like I said, we've been focusing on Atlantic City, and really, as much as this is about weather, and it's about weather and climate and changes in the environment and changes with wildlife and a lot of various changes, but it's also about people and what's going on with their lives and what's happening, and people are living with it every day. And so we're in Atlantic City. We're looking at various projects that are being proposed to mitigate any kind of sea level rise and some of the storms coming in. Looking at flooding is a huge problem there, particularly like I mentioned, the Back Bay areas in Atlantic City. So it's really looking at what's happening now, what's being planned for the future, and what the potential is in terms of what the potential is for future impact, but also, of course, what's happening today. So like I said, there's various projects that are being proposed for Atlantic City that we're looking at, that we're talking to people there about. A lot of it is trying to see, in fact, Corey's actually working on an interesting project right now that he can talk about with the bulkheads in Atlantic City. And I should probably let you, Corey, talk about that.
Sure.
The story you're working on.
So like when we went to Atlantic City about 3 weeks ago, we got to speak to a lot of the residents there about the issues. And one of the things that we noticed was, especially in the Back Bay area, there was a huge difference in the quality of bulkheads between Ventnor City and Atlantic City. They're right next to each other. And so with the help of Route 40, the news organization that we're working with, I was able to get in contact with a commissioner in Ventnor City, as well as a member of the Casino Redevelopment Authority, which are the people kind of responsible for rebuilding a lot of the just infrastructure in Atlantic City. And what he had to tell me was just Ventnor's ordinance on the bulkheads is much more enforced than in Atlantic City. See, the issue is a lot of the bulkheads are owned privately, so it's hard to get people to spend the money to fix them. But if you don't, it causes problems for the whole community. So Ventnor City really enforces it more than Atlantic City, which also has been lowering their insurance. So that's a big deal. So the whole point of the story that I want to write is to maybe just propose some solutions that Atlantic City could use to improve the situation.
Corey, Peter's showing some pictures that you guys obviously have taken through these trips. You're talking a lot about businesses and speaking with city officials. Have you been able to talk with some of the residents? Have they experienced this? Has it been noticeable to them? What are their stories as you guys continue to look at sea level rise?
Definitely. We talked to one man, Samuel, who lives in Atlantic City, and he was sharing just a lot of just nightmare situations with us about, he leaves his front door and there's just the sea's right there. The coastline is his front door, so to speak. And they're experiencing horrible floods about twice a month from what they were telling us. And it's definitely a serious problem. It's nothing to be overlooked, which it kind of is in a way.
Corey, I'm curious to ask you this because the Outer Banks, I'm not sure if you followed that.
I've been to the Outer Banks, but I'm not sure what's up to date with it.
Yeah, so the Outer Banks last week, they experienced this overwash from the ocean, and a lot of homes, a lot of these are vacation homes, but still some people live there. There were pictures of cars that were just sand up to the doors and stuff like that. And some of the people were asked, why do you continue to suffer through this? I mean, do you not want to move so you don't have to face this? You were talking of the Samuel, and he said, you're seeing this every couple of times per month. Has people there realized and got maybe fed up and said, I think it might be time to move?
Well, I think there would be a lot of people that want to move, but it comes down to the issue that no one wants to buy their homes. So a lot of people are stuck in a just overall crappy situation.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Because why would you want to buy a house on the coastline in this day and age?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. And with you folks who are watching tonight in the Carolinas, imagine the year after year after year of flood events that we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years, and all these homes that are in flood zones. Why would people want to buy those homes? And just like Corey's talking about, why would folks want to buy homes that continue to go through this flooding? Shay, I'll kick it off to you. I know you were wanting to talk a little bit about some of the information and what the end game is for the research.
Yeah, so this one, Corey, I'm going to bounce this over to your court again, and we'll work it around the table.
Okay.
But some of the articles, some of the stories that you're covering, some of the current and the past articles on your website that I'm seeing, some of the work that you've done with the climate strike that occurred last month, it seems like there's a pretty large movement starting to come together. I think folks of all ages are starting to see a pattern. They're seeing things in a different perspective now, and especially our younger group, our younger generations coming up, that are getting on board with some of these facts that are sort of in their face to go with in the future. Talk a little bit about what you did with the climate strike last month.
So me and another member of the South Jersey Climate News, Sarah, went and we met up with Mark there too. We went to the Philly climate strike, which was a part of a overall global movement. And if you remember, all over the world and the largest metropolitan areas, a lot of young people who were organized it too were there to just protest. And I think the main thing to get out of this is that it was sending a message to the politicians that you have a large group of young voters that believe in climate change, which is, I think, much different than the generations before us. I think that's something to be very optimistic about, because at the end of the day, when the people who want our votes see this, they're going to have to appeal to it in some way.
Sure. How many folks were estimated to have showed up for this entire event?
It was about I want to say 3,000.
3,000 people. And do these rallies, are they starting to occur more and more? Is there another one? Are there more that you know of coming planned, or are we just looking at a one-time event here?
I think it's no, it's definitely not going to be a one-time event. You can see a lot's going on in Europe right now, especially in Munich, and all over. And one of the organizations that was there, and they were the ones who kind of organized this, was Sunrise Philly. And they've seen exponential growth in the past year. They organize it through hubs, which is a way that young people, or just anyone really, can get involved and organize strikes like the one in Philly. And they went from, within a year, they went from, I think, about 40 hubs to over 200. And it's really growing quick. So you can expect a lot more.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that. I guess I'll pass it over to Diane. What other articles are you writing about? Maybe some of the current events that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing, of course, to write about what's happening, not just in Atlantic City, but really throughout the region. We also, like Mark had mentioned, we aggregate a lot of content from other news partners that, and you can see it all, on the website. And what we're also doing, we were talking before about what higher ed's doing. We're also we're reaching out across the university, and we're talking to people throughout the university. We have at Rowan, we have a new School of Earth and the Environment. So we're talking about partnering with them, not just in classes and in terms of the program, but also for the website, have people who are specialists in the earth and environment. We're writing blogs, working with our students, our journalism students, and actually partnering in that way to get sort of people who are experts in climate, earth and the environment, environment in general, working with our journalists to produce stories that talk about the impact in the area, not only climate change, but just in general, some of the other problems that we have in New Jersey, anything from pollution. Our focus is climate change, but there's other impacts, other problems that we have here, obviously, that we could be talking about. Development is a huge problem, overdevelopment in the area. So we're looking, short term, we're going to continue to write about what's happening along the coastline. We're going to also move to the Bay Area. There's also in South Jersey, there's this side, the western side of the southern part of the edge of the state. That's all Bay Area, which is also being impacted. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to continue to not only partner, like I said, with news organizations, but we're also going to partner within the university to produce content, and get the word out. And the more content that we produce, and the more partnerships that we build, and the more attention, that we can bring to the topic, then we can start actually sort of having more conversation about it, more discussion of solutions, possibly. We have a push for a big social media push that we'd like to make, so we can actually start engaging people and talking about, well, what can we do? What can be done? So that's, I guess, long term, one of the goals that we have is to move toward, talking about what can be done and how can we get there. So that's kind of where, part of where we're headed with all this.
Yeah, we're getting some pressure even at Weatherflow with some of our sensors up that way. Ludlam Bay, Barnegat Bay, we're getting some questions from folks along our coastal sensors, maybe with NOAA, working with NOS, Karakus, any of these organizations that could maybe help fund water tables, right? So, we're not really equipped for that. Our sensors can handle it on the power load, I believe, but we'd have to supplement. And it's more of a matter of working together with a partnership to try to find some solutions. But yeah, that's a prime area that we've been asked about as well. Let me flip this over to Mark. And as a department head, you're in charge of a lot. You're in charge of kind of, I would assume, maintaining some of these partnerships, or maybe getting new partnerships. Or do you find it maybe easier now that more people are on board with the cause here and what you're doing, that you're finding more cooperation with your efforts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. One is, as Diane mentioned, as kind of, newsrooms have shrunk or gone out of business, news organizations are more open to collaborating with each other than they used to be in the past. It used to be like everyone was a competitor and you wanted to beat your competitor. And now we're in this situation where it's like we're all kind of in this together. So I think news organizations are interested in not only partnering with each other, but with universities, with scientists. I think there's some cool stuff going on as people try to figure out how to kind of bridge these gaps. So that's one level. I think it's become, I think the awareness of climate issues has increased. And I think you mentioned Superstorm Sandy earlier. it's, that's kind of in the back of everyone's mind. But if you go to a place like Atlantic City, it's something that people are still dealing with on a daily basis. So you see people are still trying to get their houses elevated, or they're still trying to, get flood insurance or get payments. And so it's something that's ongoing. So I think it's something that people they're waking up to. And so that's kind of an interesting aspect as well.
Understood. And Diane, we talked. I was grazing a little bit about sensors earlier from our perspective, but from your perspective, are you looking to supplement your efforts here, maybe even on your website, with getting your own instrumentation to start monitoring the weather and the climate up your way?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that was actually early on. One of our ideas is using sensors to collect our own data. And we are still pursuing that. We are going to need some grant funding to do it. So that's been part of the rub there. But we've talked about trying to put sensors into different areas of Atlantic City just to see what's happening in neighborhoods, because that's how much change you can see, even in a relatively small area. Atlantic City is only 17 square miles, but there's a lot of change, depending on where you are in the city. And also, yes, exactly what you're saying. We'd like to get some sensors out there to collect our own data so we can pass it along to residents and build this collaboration and actually work toward, like we said, some type of solution. Because if you know that one area gets hit harder than others, you start to ask why and how can you address it.
Yeah, we're starting to see lots of mesonettes, more and more mesonettes popping up on the grid. So more and more data is coming through. We're trying to work with other partners as well and get that information, that public data, out into several products. And so that's great. What kind of information are you looking to get in your sensors? What sort of instrumentation are you looking to get?
Well, we were originally thinking originally we were keeping it simple, temperature and precipitation. There's actually a different group in Atlantic City collecting flood data. So we were thinking, different areas, what's the precipitation, what's the temperature changes. And, in spring, summer, and fall along the coast, as I'm sure you see in your area, there's huge differences in precipitation, even, like I said, within the same city, or in temperature, so that's what we're looking at. So we've started getting some weather stations and we're starting to collect data. We have one that we've been testing over the summer. We think it's probably more than we need, so we may go simpler. Like I said, and we're also applying for grant funding to see if we can start to place the centers around the city. But originally we were going to start at Atlantic City. We have some locations we scouted out. And then hopefully, we actually have some news partners up and down the coast of New Jersey, the southern New Jersey area, Cape May, and some of the other areas. So ultimately, we'd like to be able to partner with news organizations, put some sensors in, start to collect our own data, and just kind of keep building, our knowledge of what's going on in these areas.
Absolutely. I think that's the key to some of your research right there is gathering your own data and showing some of those facts. I know I helped someone out here at CFC with one of their projects this past summer. Evan finally helped him finish that through, and we were looking at sea breeze structure. But either way, it's changing, right? Things are changing. So, any other questions about the website or any from the rest of the panel?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, I'll bounce it over to Peter, and if anybody has any other questions, they can ask. But I'll go ahead and bounce it over to Peter. I'm sorry, Peter, and say, I don't know why I said that. I think it's between the Starbucks and the Cinnabons, maybe. But either way,
it reminds me of the Hunger Games.
Give your social media plug for you, your site, everything you guys have.
Well, I've been called worse. So we are on Twitter and Instagram. We just made an Instagram last month. So Twitter, it's SJ Climate News, and the same thing for Instagram. So we're going to be adding more and more on both platforms as we go on through the semester and going on next semester and however long this project goes. So you can find articles, videos, pictures, all the trips we go on, and even Instagram stories we did during our Atlantic City trip. So a lot of good content coming our way. Give us a follow and share it along with other people too.
Well, Peter, I'll take over from there. Thank you guys so much for being on with us tonight. Great research, and hopefully you'll be able to get some more grant money and get some of those sensors and continue the great work you all are doing. Feel free to stick around if you want to. I'm not sure if we have our video break tonight. I know James had to go tend to baby Theo, so I'm going to assume that we're going to skip our break since James is kind of multitasking here. So, Shay, I am going to hand it off to you. I know all interest, at least in the tropical world, is on the Gulf of Mexico. We are kind of winding down the hurricane season, but until November 30th, we still got to keep our eyes on the tropics.
Nope, you're absolutely right. So I'm trying to pull up one more little map here. I'm going to share screen here in just a second. Just real quick, you know, we're still in that little spike, that little uptick towards the mid-October area. And after about the 20th of September, I'm sorry, of October, things start to wind down pretty quickly. Our sea surface temperature is cool. We're really only looking at a couple of areas that are threats, such as the Eastern Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, and then also the Gulf of Mexico, Southern Florida, these areas. And so that's where we're coming in right now with our next system. And I'll go ahead and share this screen. Now, this system has been slowly moving across the Yucatan Peninsula on the southern portion of it across Central America. It's just now moving over the Bay of Campeche. Let me update this. This is actually from 2:00 p.m. Here's the 8 o'clock update. So the chances are now up to 60% for the system. It's going to head north and then eventually off to the northeast and head towards the southeast region of the United States. This is going to be on the move, and part of that is because of a cold front that's draped over the area. So it's going to be entering into what's called a baroclinic zone, which means there's frontal activity. Now, whether or not this actually acquires a name has yet to be determined. If it's tropical enough to acquire a TC name, if it becomes strong enough and we get a strong enough surface over the Gulf. But with this frontal activity, it's going to be riding along. It may not get a name. If it does, it may be Nelson. And so we're gonna watch and see, because we also have the subtropical jet that's going to be forcing this to the northeast as well. So this, along a front, another frontal system moving into the area, may keep this as a subtropical or maybe even a mid-latitude cyclone. So we're not entirely sure if it's going to be a tropical storm name if it does become that. But if you see the track here heading up towards the southeast region, again, pairing it with our drought monitor, this could be significant for helping with the drought in the southeast region, as I spoke to earlier. Much needed rainfall. Hopefully we can get some of that pushed up into western North Carolina, northern Georgia as well, and up into these Midlands and upstates of each of these states for the southeast region. With that said, Scotty, I'll push it right back to you.
Thanks, Shay. Kind of stealing a little bit of my thunder. I was going to give us a little drought update, but as you saw the graphic there, Shay's already got displayed. We can we'll do a little zoomed in version of our drought monitoring, kind of show you what's going on. So let me get that pulled up. Are you guys able to see this? Let's see. No, not yet, but now you should be able to see this. So here is a look at South Carolina. There's several areas that we see of extreme drought. One up in York County, over into Greenville and Anderson County, as well as Oconee County in the upstate of South Carolina, and then over towards the Columbia area in the Midlands of South Carolina, and eventually down into Allendale County. Those are just kind of isolated pockets of extreme drought. Hopefully, I don't know how much of the rainfall that we saw over the past couple of days will affect this. I don't think we'll see any of the drought conditions grow unless it's here off the coastal plain. But at least the rainfall we saw was probably be able to kind of at least keep the drought conditions at bay. As we look into North Carolina, not as bad. We have a large section of the Piedmont in the moderate drought. We do have the severe drought over the western Piedmont into the foothills and mountains of North Carolina. So that area has kind of been targeted with the severe drought. I will say, and one thing that Evan will be talking about here in a little bit, is we are going to see some rain and some cooler temperatures in this area. So that will help with the drought conditions as well. So that's kind of a quick look at the drought conditions. I'm going to pass it over to Evan because he's been monitoring. He loves this time of the year. Evan's like a kid in a candy store when we start to get these cold fronts to pass through and these northwest flow events to set up. So Evan, I'll toss it over to you, my friend.
Yeah,
Real
so
quick,
right, Scotty.
real quick here. I got the name wrong. It's not Nelson. It's Nestor. I don't know why I spaced that, but Nestor. I was thinking of Jeremy Nelson when the meteorologist we were talking earlier about it. So it kind of popped into my mind there. But yeah, anyways, go ahead, Evan. Just wanted to clarify that real quick.
No, you're fine. There's a bunch of unique names this year for tropical systems, so that's definitely an understandable misstep. No, Scotty, you're absolutely right. I was completely off the grid this weekend, had no connection, wasn't seeing a weather forecast, and I came home to find that we're looking at a pretty amplified pattern over the next three weeks or so, especially heading into the end of October. Um, Lots of cold fronts moving through the area. The graph or the map that Shay was just showing showed that cold front draped over the area and really showed the low pressure system off the northeast that's currently bombing out, and the pressure falls are just continuously getting lower and lower. So yeah, right now we're expecting much colder temperatures to move into the area, at least on 2 to 3 occasions over the next 2 weeks. As Shay said earlier in the program, I will be hesitant to say the S word, but since it's me, no, I'll just go ahead and say it. I don't care. I do think that it's entirely possible that the high peaks above, I'm going to say 5,000 feet, could see their first northwest flow snow showers of the season before the end of October. When exactly that's going to be, I think it's too early to say. But as you're seeing on the screen right now, we're seeing this colder air move into the area with lots of temperatures down into the 30s and even into the 20s up at high elevations. And that's what we're looking for when these northwest flow systems are moving through. And we're getting that long fetch of precipitate, or I should say moisture, coming off of the Great Lakes. In terms of serious rain, what you're looking at right here might be the biggest rainmaker over the next week. That system that could be Nestor, if I'm saying that right, that it could produce, I'm going to say, up to an inch, maybe across western North Carolina. Certainly some locations could see more. There's still some finite details there to be worked out about what that's going to do. And Scotty's already with this. I think he's sharing all the screens. But yes, that's what you're looking at. The WPC is forecasting almost 2 inches across parts of western North Carolina, but certainly widespread 1 to 2 inches across the Carolinas in general. Overall, we're stepping into fall. The beginning of October was full blast summer for most of the Carolinas. The head meteorologist Tim Buckley in Raleigh was tweeting today that just 2 weeks ago in Raleigh it was 94 degrees. So it's kind of hard to believe that we've made such a quick transition from full blast summer heat to now all of a sudden it's getting a little bit chilly. And the mornings are certainly a bit nippy, and frost is starting to work into the forecast. And Evan just said snow. So no, I don't think that the hype about October snow is going to live up to its name. There's a couple of outlets mentioning the potential for snowfall on October 31st, and we're certainly too far out to know what exactly is going to happen at that point. But with the negative North Atlantic oscillation and the blocking over Greenland, it's setting up a great pattern for these constant northwest flows to sweep through the region over the next 2 weeks. And while it really won't affect many people in the valleys, my personal favorite is definitely the high winds. This time of year, I typically, as I've defined it, and I'm coming out with a research paper in the near future, high wind season is typically beginning in October 1st or around October 1st to October 10th. And we're really jumping right into that. As we speak, winds are gusting up towards 80 miles an hour on Grandfather Mountain. And that's significant. That definitely defines the first high wind event of the season. And as these troughs get more and more amplified, and we see more of this northwest flow happening, it's certainly possible that we could see some of the more extreme gusts up in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 miles an hour. Super lame for people that aren't into the high wind events, but for me, I think that's fascinating and super exciting. So I'm done rambling about the stuff that I love, but Scotty, I'll toss it back to you.
I told you he's like a kid in a candy store. One thing I wanted to point out why Evan was talking about that, I know we're in a drought in western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, but I think I can draw on this. So let's see if we can do this. Yeah, there we go. So this is the potential storm that we're watching. We do know that, at least if you live here in the Carolinas, when we have this low pressure move across the low country of South Carolina, low pressures have that counterclockwise motion. So we're going to see moisture being pulled into the Western Carolinas from the Atlantic as well as the Gulf. So these mountains, the Appalachian Mountains that everyone knows loves, could actually aid in the development of some significant heavy rain over Western North Carolina into the Western Piedmont and upstate of South Carolina late Saturday night into Sunday. So I'm not saying that we're going to see flash flooding, but the potential is there to see some heavier rainfall develop on the escarpment of the Blue Ridge Mountains, just because those mountains add additional lift. And when we get additional lift, we kind of wring out all the moisture out of the column of air. And we got to see those heavy rain bands develop on the escarpment of the Blue Ridge. So if you live in places like Asheville, Hickory, Morganton, Marion, up towards Lenoir, Wilkesboro, even a little bit down into the Charlotte area, we could see some more heavier rain bands set up Saturday night into Sunday. So just keep that in mind.
Scotty, leave that there for a second. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that when you get that kind of lifting, it's called isentropic lifting up into the mountainous areas. Yeah, so that's sort of when you have warm layer aloft, you have the subtropical jet over that. This is known as a CAD killer, and it can lift that, bring cool air out, drive cool air out, and bring warm air up underneath, and it just drives rain up the slopes. But also notice off the coast of South Carolina, North Carolina, especially around the Cape Fear area, where these systems have another tendency here to draw in a lot of heavy-duty moisture and a lot of rotation supercells that drive into the coastline there, especially the Cape Fear area. So something to be wary of is that area, because it feeds off of the Gulf Stream, very rich evaporative water off of the fresher thermal haline layer there. So we get a lot of storms, a lot of tornadic activity in that area. So always be wary of that with these tropical systems, even if it's not a named system or even a tropical cyclone per se, it can still drive that kind of event into that area. Even with waters right now in the upper 70s, that Gulf Stream's still in the low to mid 80s.
Yeah, definitely so. And thanks to Levi Cowan with Tropical Tidbits for providing all this information for us. We certainly appreciate that. So again, like Shay was talking about, severe weather threat possibly for the eastern South Carolina, North Carolina, heavy rain threat for the mountains and western Piedmont of North Carolina. I will say this, Evan, Shay, you guys can chime in. I wish we could buy this in December, because that would be one heck of a snow event developing for portions of the Carolinas. So let's hope we can kind of keep a track something similar like this if you're a big snow lover in the Carolinas. So that is something we'll have to watch as well. So again,
somebody throw Scotty out of here.
Yeah, he's done. We're done.
The big sign says warm nose, no warm nose.
If he didn't say it, I would have said it. So I'm with you, Scott.
That's right. We're Team Western North Carolina here. We get excited when we see those set up. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate everyone. Diana, Mark, Peter, Corey, thank you guys for the research you are doing. And we continue to look forward to more of the research, and hopefully you can get some of that grant money and continue to add on to the research project. Everyone go follow them on Twitter and Instagram, on all the social media accounts. We will see you back here next Wednesday night. We are going to be talking about drought from the University of Georgia. Professor Pam Knox will be joining us. She's going to talk about what we've experienced over the past 2 months. This is what we call a flash drought. She was able to present some information on this drought a couple of weeks ago. So Pam's going to be joining us talking about the drought and actually how it's affecting the agricultural, not only now, but how it could affect it as we go into the 2020 growing season. So we're looking forward to that. And then after that, we're going to be talking about winter weather and kind of give you some refresher on some of the terms that you might hear over the winter season. So we have some good shows lined up for you for the rest of the month. As always, we encourage you to send us some suggestions of topics or guests you would like for us to talk to, or topics to talk about. You can do that easily on our social media platforms. Just shoot us a message and we'll get working on that. So we hope you enjoyed tonight's show. We will see you back here next Wednesday night for another edition of the Carolina Weather Group.